Good morning, everyone. As I've already mentioned in the past, I am a self-employed peripatetic music teacher in the borders. I am not a lawyer. And you know, from what I've discovered about lawyers and the legal system over there in Wisconsin, I'm glad I'm not a lawyer. I'm not exactly a fan of some of the lawyers over there. I particularly don't like the lawyers who act like politicians. You can see where they're headed. They're going to go up the political ladder and they add their own spin on things. They twist the truth. I'm going to say they add their own angle to it to try and make it look completely different to what it is. I know that's kind of vague, but we compare some of the lawyers over there in Wisconsin with the likes of Kathleen Zellner, and we realised that, you know, with her, it's not about spin. She gets experts to prove that Steve and Brendan were framed and that they are totally innocent. When I was in Amsterdam, it'll be nearly a year now since I was in Amsterdam. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Obviously got to meet Jerry Buting and David Rudolph. And as I mentioned, I met Jerry as he was arriving in his taxi. And he said about the fact that, you know, have you got questions? Because they often take questions from the audience, which they then answer. So he took my question, and guess what the first question was on the evening? It was one that I'd asked, which was basically so that it incorporated both Jerry and David Rudolph. I simply asked the question, who is the worst prosecutor, Ken Kratz or Jim Harding? Although Jim Harding was particularly despicable, and of course is now a judge, Jim Harding pales compared with Ken Kratz. Jim Harding, as far as we know, does not have a vile sexual harassment, sexting career in his background. Another thing we don't like about certain lawyers is that they like to play their games of hide and seek when it's not a game. It's very, very serious. The other thing I don't like about lawyers is the fact that they regulate themselves, which again causes huge problems. Anyway, moving on very swiftly to victim number 9, a confidential informant, probably the worst example of Sweaty Kratz's behaviour. I will just mention that if you're following on the Wisconsin DOJ reports on the Convoluted Brian site, then I have skipped a complaint from someone regarding the decisions made by Calumet Sheriff's Department and Calumet District Attorney's Office in respect to a legal guardianship of a special needs adult. That's all we get to know about it. We do not get to find out any details about this case other than the fact that they put it into a separate file, into a different file. So your guess is as good as mine as to what that was to do with. Anyway, the interview of this confidential informant, victim number 9. Let's see, who we had so far. So Stephanie Van Grohl, second was Maria Ruskovich, Dawn King, then we had a confidential informant, then we had Susan Sorensen, Rebecca Heatpus, Connie Palm, we had the confidential informant number 8, and now this is confidential informant number 9. As I say, probably the most vile of all the bits of behaviour by Ken Kratz. Let's see what happened. So this interview took place on October 19th, 2010. The investigators said that she was visibly upset and that she actually thought that she had done something wrong and would be facing prison. She also mentioned, quite interestingly, that when she had this contact with Ken Kratz, she was on prescription medication. Isn't it interesting how Ken Kratz uses the idea that he was on these prescription medications, he was addicted to them, when this girl is saying that she was the same when Ken Kratz contacted her. Wonder if that's where he got the story from. Anyway, she had previously been prosecuted 5 years earlier for shoplifting by Ken Kratz. But this is at the end of 2009 when Kratz called her completely out of the blue. And she has no idea how did Ken Kratz get her number. But anyway, he talked about the fact that he was getting a divorce and he wanted to talk to her about things. He got her address and he went to see her. While he was there, he told her that he knew everything about her and that he could get her, quote, jammed up, and that, quote, I can make trouble for you. Moving on to the next page. Obviously, she didn't understand what Ken Kratz meant by that, but she was terrified. Then, typically, Ken Kratz engaged in talking about his favourite subject, him and his sexual fantasies. That he wanted her to wear black leggings and high heels, to have her hair down and contact lenses in. He then went on to say what he likes to do with these women that have dressed up for him. He takes them to his special room, he ties them up and they follow his instructions, or he hits them, he hurts them. He then instructs this woman, who's, as I say, terrified, to perform fellatio, and specifically holds her hands behind her back and then clamped her mouth shut in order to ensure that she had to swallow. Chuffed with what he had done, Kratz then had several beers. I would just point out that our confidential informant in the report points out to the investigators that she had been raped at 16, and that felt exactly the same. As I say, Kratz then helped himself to many beers and cheese and biscuits, and then told her that she was a good hostess, and that surprised him. He then called it about 50 times after that, and she ignored him. And she even hid when he came to the apartment a couple of times to pretend that she was not in. Now, Ken Kratz got very annoyed about the fact that he had left $75 and wanted further contact with her. And she wasn't playing ball, so he got angry and wanted it back. Pleased to say, she actually gave the $75 to a local church. Also, she came forward in support of the other victims. As I say, she was pretty terrified, particularly when Kratz turned up, having prosecuted her 5 years previously, telling her that he could make trouble for her. I think that's quite telling, you know, that the prosecutor can make things up. Where have we come across that before? As I say, she came forward in support of the other victims, but in particular of Maria Ruskovich, the girl that wanted the pardon of the minor drug offence from 10 years ago, so that she could continue in law school. What I find particularly interesting about this, we know that Ken Kratz loves to talk about the fact that he feels that Stephen Avery, as soon as he was in jail for those 18 years, wrongfully convicted, all he ever thought about was how he could attack somebody once he was out. And that as soon as he could get somebody suitable, and obviously in the case of Teresa, he could then attack her and kill her. But I get the clear sense that Ken Kratz actually has a dislike of women. I think there's something in his past that causes him to want to dominate women. I think perhaps there's been something emotionally that happened. He often talks about 7th grade, and I wonder if there's been something in his past that has made him so that he's like that. Because of the way that he talks about Stephen Avery spending his 18 years in prison. You see, I think Ken Kratz can't help but give us insights into his way of thinking. As I've said before, Ken Kratz is what Ken Kratz does. To tie women up, to hit them, we hear about this safe word, Rumpelstiltskin, but I suspect he really does have this complex about women. Maybe somebody in the past has really embarrassed him, and this is him trying to get his own back on his victims. As we discover, he puts it down to these prescription drugs. I would suggest it's a story that he's used, as we're yet to discover. I think it's just his the way he is. It's in his character. It's his personality. It's in his DNA. It's in his sweaty DNA. Actually, one other thing I was going to mention, the latest 80 More Things is out. I will put the link in the description, and so you can check out Julie, Pom Pom and Fen and Mystic Jinx talking. So the quality of the conversation has gone up immeasurably since the dude and myself appeared. Anyway, check that one out, and we'll catch you again soon with victim number 10 coming up soon. Rennie Braun. I'll need to do a bit of research, and then we'll catch you later. Bye for now.